Welcome back to the History Channel's live coverage of the dedication ceremony of the National World War II Memorial.
FedEx Corporation, Frederick W. Smith, National Co-Chairman of the World War II Memorial Campaign.
Thank you. You know, it seems so long ago now that Senator Dole asked me to help raise funds for this magnificent memorial you've just seen. It was the summer of 1997, and he had been national chairman of the fundraising campaign for only a few months. The campaign was in its embryonic stage, slowly picking up momentum. But it really wasn't until the summer of 1998 that we began to see solid results. If you remember, that's when Steven Spielberg's film, Saving Private Ryan, put a face to the World War II generation for millions of Americans, reminding us of the selfless courage, dedication, and sacrifice so common during those war years. Tom Brokaw further defined the greatest generation as ordinary people doing ordinary things. And Tom Hanks began telling, appropriately, the American people that it was time to say thank you. At that point, the memorial honoring the sacrifices made during the Second World War came to represent an entire generation of Americans who selflessly left their homes for battlefields, factories, and farms, doing whatever it took to meet the needs of a nation at war. Now, every family has stories to tell of those years, including my own, with 6 World War II veterans in it. The World War II themed films and books that became popular as we reached the end of the 20th century encouraged others to share those stories and generated increased awareness of our efforts to fund the World War II Memorial. Our fundraising became a campaign across America, from corporate boardrooms to school classrooms, from the largest veterans organizations to the smallest reunion groups, from state legislatures to individual homes. Many of our contributors are listed in your program. Their gifts led the way, but every bit as important were individuals like young Zane Fayos from Fayetteville, New York. He gave his entire life savings of $195 to say thank you to Grandma and Grandpa. We sincerely thank everyone who did their part, large or small, to make this memorial a reality. Being part of this National Memorial Project has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my professional life. And it has been a special honor to work alongside a man who has become the personification of America's World War II veterans. As most of you know, Senator Bob Dole was a distinguished combat leader, grievously wounded, whose incredible tenacity allowed him to come to the national stage and go on to become one of our nation's greatest leaders. It is my distinct pleasure and my great honor, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce the National Chairman of the World War II Memorial Fundraising Campaign, one of the true greats of the greatest generation, Senator Bob Dole.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Never had a crowd like this when I was running. Well, it's a real honor and privilege to be here. And I won't even begin to start where you say thank you, because where do you stop? But Fred Smith, who so kindly introduced me, was my mainstay and opened a lot of doors, along with General Hurling and Jim Aylward and others at our commission. And P.X. Kelly has done a splendid job and has a great staff. And when our fundraising was sort of ebbing, President Clinton, if you recall, he took us down to the White House and brought in some potential contributors and gave us a little spark. I want to thank both President Clinton and President Bush, 41, for their generous contributions to the World War II Memorial. In the first week of January 1945, a hungry and lonesome second lieutenant from small-town Kansas dispatched a message to his folks back home. "You can send me something to eat whenever you're ready," he wrote. "Send candy, gum, cookies, cheese, grape jelly, popcorn, nuts, peanut clusters, Vicks Vapo Rub, wool socks, wool scarf, fudge cookies, ice cream, liver and onions, fried chicken, banana cake, milk, fruit cocktails, Swiss steaks, crackers, more candy, lifesavers, peanuts, the piano, the radio, the living room suite, and the record player, and Frank Sinatra. I guess you might as well send the whole house if you can get it into a 5-pound box. P.S. Keep your fingers crossed." In authoring that only slightly exaggerated wish list, I merely echoed the longings of 16 million Americans whose greatest wish was for an end to the fighting. And 60 years on, our ranks have dwindled. For the thousands assembled here on the Mall, and the millions more watching all across America in living rooms and hospitals and wherever it may be, and overseas, our men and women overseas, and our friends in Great Britain and our allies all around the world, our final reunion cannot long be delayed. Yet if we gather in the twilight, it is brightened by the knowledge that we have kept faith with our comrades from a distant youth, sustained by over 600,000 individual contributions. 600,000. We have raised this memorial to commemorate the service and sacrifice of an entire generation. What we dedicate today is not a memorial to war, rather is a tribute to the physical and moral courage that makes heroes out of farm and city boys, that inspires Americans in every generation to lay down their lives for people they will never meet, for ideals that make life itself worth living. This is also a memorial to the American people, who in the crucible of war forged a unity that became our ultimate weapon. Just as we pulled together in the course of a common threat 60 years ago, so today's Americans united to build this memorial. Small children held their grandfather's hand while dropping pennies in a collection box. Entire families contributed in memory of loved ones who could win every battle except the battle against time. I think of my brother Kenny and my brothers-in-law Larry Nelson and Alan Steele, just three among the millions of ghosts in navy blue and olive drab who we honor with this memorial. And of course, not every warrior wore a uniform. As it happens, today is the 101st birthday of Bob Hope, the GI's favorite entertainer, who did more to boost our morale than anyone next to Betty Grable. And I can already hear Bob, but I was next to Betty Grable. And it's hard to believe, but today is also the 87th birthday of John F. Kennedy, a hero of the South Pacific who a generation after the surrender documents were signed on board the USS Missouri spoke of a new generation of Americans tempered by war that was nevertheless willing to pay any price, to bear any burden, to meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty. And we shall always honor the memory of our great leader and our American hero, General Eisenhower, who led us to victory all across the world. As we meet here today, young Americans are risking their lives in liberty's defense. They are the latest link in a chain of sacrifice older than America itself. After all, if we meet the test of our times, it was because we drew inspiration from those who had gone before, including the giants of history who are enshrined on this mall. From Washington, who fathered America with his sword and ennobled it with his character. From Jefferson, whose pen gave eloquent voice to our noblest aspirations. From Lincoln, who preserved the Union and struck the chains from our countrymen. And from Franklin Roosevelt, who presided over a global coalition to rescue humanity from those who had put the soul itself in bondage. Each of these presidents was a soldier of freedom. In the defining event of the 20th century, their cause became our cause. On distant fields and fathomless oceans, the skies over half a planet, and in 10,000 communities on the home front, we did far more than avenge Pearl Harbor. The citizen soldiers who answered liberty's call fought not for territory, but for justice, not for plunder, but to liberate enslaved peoples around the world. In contending for democracy abroad, we learned painful lessons about our own democracy. For us, the Second World War was in effect a second American Revolution. The war invited women into the workforce. It exposed the injustice visited on African Americans, Hispanics, and Japanese Americans, and others, who demonstrated yet again that war is an equal opportunity employer. What we learned in foreign fields of battle, we applied in post-war America. As a result, our democracy, though imperfect, is more nearly perfect than in the days of Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Roosevelt. That's what makes America forever a work in progress, a land that has never become, but is always in the act of becoming. And that's why the armies of democracy have earned a permanent place on this sacred ground. It is only fitting when this memorial was opened to the public about a month ago, the very first visitors were school children. For them, our war is ancient history, and those who fought it are slightly ancient themselves. Yet in the end, they are the ones for whom we built this shrine, and to whom we now hand the baton in the unending relay of human possibility. Certainly the heroes represented by the 4,000 gold stars on the Freedom Wall need no monument to commemorate their sacrifice. They are known to God and to their fellow soldiers who will mourn their passing until the day of our own. In their names, we dedicate this place of meditation, and it is in their memory that I ask you to stand, if possible, and join me in a moment of silent tribute to remind us all that at some time in our life, we have or may be called upon to make a sacrifice for our country to preserve liberty and freedom. God bless America.
We are awaiting the arrival of the 43rd President of the United States, George Bush, who will address this audience in just a moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Mr. President, it is my distinct honor, on behalf of the American Battle Monuments Commission, to present to you and the American people the National World War II Memorial. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, our Commander-in-Chief, George W. Bush.
Thank you all very much. I'm honored to join with President Clinton, President Bush, Senator Dole, and other distinguished guests on this day of remembrance and celebration. And General Kelly, here in the company of the generation that won the war, I proudly accept the World War II Memorial on behalf of the people of the United States of America. Raising up this memorial took skill and vision and patience. Now the work is done, and it is a fitting tribute, open and expansive like America, grand and enduring like the achievements we honor. The years of World War II were a hard, heroic, and gallant time in the life of our country. When it mattered most, an entire generation of Americans showed the finest qualities of our nation and of humanity. On this day, in their honor, we will raise the American flag over a monument that will stand as long as America itself. In the history books, the Second World War can appear as a series of crises and conflicts following an inevitable course. From Pearl Harbor to the coast of Normandy to the deck of the Missouri. Yet on the day the war began, and on many hard days that followed, the outcome was far from certain. There was a time in the years before the war when many earnest and educated people believed that democracy was finished. Men who considered themselves learned and civilized came to believe that free institutions must give way to the severe doctrines and stern discipline of a regimented society. Ideas first whispered in the secret councils of a remote empire or shouted in the beer halls of Munich became mass movements. And those movements became armies. And those armies moved mercilessly forward until the world saw Hitler strutting in Paris and U.S. Navy ships burning in their own port. Across the world, from a hiding place in Holland to prison camps of Lausanne, the captives awaited their liberators. Those liberators would come, but the enterprise would require the commitment and effort of our entire nation. As World War II began, after a decade of economic depression, the United States was not a rich country. Far from being a great power, we had only the 17th largest army in the world. To fight and win on two fronts, Americans had to work and save and ration and sacrifice as never before. War production plants operated shifts around the clock. Across the country, families planted victory gardens, 20 million of them, producing 40% of the nation's vegetables in backyards and on rooftops. 2 out of every 3 citizens put money into war bonds. As Colonel Ovida Culp Hobby said, this was a people's war, and everyone was in it. As life changed in America, so did the way that Americans saw our own country and its place in the world. The bombs at Pearl Harbor destroyed the very idea that America could live in isolation from the plots of aggressive powers. The scenes of the concentration camps, the heaps of bodies and ghostly survivors, confirm forever America's calling to oppose the ideologies of death. As we defended our ideals, we began to see that America is stronger when those ideals are fully implemented. America gained strength because women labored for victory in factory jobs, cared for the wounded, and wore the uniform themselves. America gained strength because African Americans and Japanese Americans and others fought for their country, which wasn't always fair to them. In time, these contributions became expectations of equality, and the advances for justice in post-war America made us a better country. With all our flaws, Americans at that time had never been more united. And together we began and completed the largest single task in our history. At the height of conflict, America would have ships on every ocean and armies on 5 continents. And on the most crucial of days, would move the equivalent of a major city across the English Channel. And all these vast movements of men in armor were directed by one man who could not walk on his own strength. President Roosevelt brought his own advantages to the job. His resolve was stronger than the will of any dictator. His belief in democracy was absolute. He possessed a daring that kept the enemy guessing. He spoke to Americans with an optimism that lightened their task. And one of the saddest days of the war came just as it was ending, when the casualty notice in the morning paper began with the name Franklin D. Roosevelt, Commander-in-Chief. Across the years, we still know his voice. And from his words, we know that he understood the character of the American people. Dictators and their generals had dismissed Americans as no match for a master race. FDR answered them. In one of his radio addresses, he said, "We have been described as a nation of weaklings, playboys. Let them tell that to General MacArthur and his men. Let them tell that to the boys in the flying fortresses. Let them tell that to the Marines." And all more than 16 million Americans would put on the uniform of the soldier, the sailor, the airman, the Marine, the Coast Guardsman, or the merchant mariner. They came from city streets and prairie towns, from public high schools and West Point. They were a modest bunch, and still are. The ranks were filled with men like Army Private Joe Saccato. And having fighting in France, he saw a good friend killed and charged up a hill, determined to shoot the ones who did it. Private Saccato ran straight into enemy fire, killing 12, wounding 2, capturing 4, and inspiring his whole unit to take the hill and destroy the enemy. Looking back on it 55 years later, Joe Ciccato said, "I'm not a hero. Nowadays, they call what I did road rage." This man's conduct that day gained him the Medal of Honor, one of 464 awarded for actions in World War II. Americans in uniform served bravely, fought fiercely, and kept their honor even under the worst of conditions. Yet they were not warriors by nature. All they wanted was to finish the job and make it home. One soldier in the 58th Armored Field Artillery was known to have the best kept rifle in the unit. He told his buddies he had plans for that weapon after the war. He said, "I want to take it home, cover it in salt, hang it on the wall in my living room so I can watch it rust." These were the modest sons of a peaceful country. And millions of us are very proud to call them Dad. They gave the best years of their lives to the greatest mission their country ever accepted. They faced the most extreme danger, which took some and spared others for reasons only known to God. And wherever they advanced or touched ground, they are remembered for their goodness and their decency. A Polish man recalls being marched through the German countryside in the last weeks of the war, when American forces suddenly appeared. He said, "Our 2 guards ran away, and this soldier with little blonde hair jumps off his tank. 'You're free,' he shouts at us. We started hugging each other, crying and screaming. God sent angels down to pick us up out of this hell place." Well, our boys weren't exactly angels. They were flesh and blood, with all the limits and fears of flesh and blood. That only makes the achievement more remarkable. The courage they showed in a conflict that claimed more than 400,000 American lives, leaving so many orphans and widows and Gold Star mothers. The soldier's story was best told by the great Ernie Pyle, who shared their lives and died among them. In his book, Here's Your War, he described World War II as many veterans now remember it. It's a picture he wrote of tired and dirty soldiers who are alive and don't want to die, of long darkened convoys in the middle of the night, of shocked silent men wandering back down the hill from battle, of jeeps and petrol dumps and smelly bedding rolls and sea rations, and blown bridges and dead mules and hospital tents and shirt collars greasy black from months of wearing, and of laughter too, and anger and wine and lovely flowers and constant cussing. All these it is composed of, and of graves and graves and graves. On this Memorial Day weekend, the graves will be visited and decorated with flowers and flags. Men who stepped as slowed are thinking of boys they knew when they were boys together. And women who watched the train leave and the years passed can still see the handsome face of their young sweetheart. America will not forget them either. At this place, at this memorial, we acknowledge a debt of long standing to an entire generation of Americans. Those who died, those who fought and worked and grieved and went on. They saved our country and thereby saved the liberty of mankind. And now I ask every man and woman who saw and lived World War II, every member of that generation, to please rise as you are able and receive the thanks of our great nation. May God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the presentation of colors and the national anthem, sung by star of the Metropolitan and Washington Operas, Denise Graves.
We're so gallantly Land that I love, stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, wide with America, my home sweet home.
Please welcome the chaplain of the United States Senate, Dr. Barry C. Black.
Let us bow for the benediction. Eternal Spirit, your faithfulness endures through all generations. We praise you for the more than 16 million Americans who served and sacrificed during World War II, and for this memorial to their courage. Remind us that true peace is not the absence of war, but the experience of being in your presence. Forgive the selfish desires of our human family that war against the spirit and lead us to violence. As we live on this fragile planet, empower us to plant seeds of peace that will bring a harvest of justice. Make us pure, kind, sensible, and sincere, and hasten the day when the prophecy of Isaiah will be fulfilled. We will beat our swords into plowshares and our spears into pruning hooks, and study war no more. Now the God of peace be with us all. Amen.
My fellow Americans, that concludes the formal dedication of your World War II Memorial. Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us for this historic event. The memorial will open this evening at 7 for visitation, but thank you and God bless this great country.
And that concludes a very emotional and patriotic ceremony here on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. You are watching current President Bush, former Presidents Bush and Clinton as they shake hands with a number of World War II veterans that have gathered here for this very, very, very special occasion. We're going to take a brief break, and we'll continue with more of our coverage here in D.C.